So, regular viewers, you know, we talk a lot about education, especially in the United States, but also globally. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Mexico and the broader Latin American region when it comes to education. And joining us today, we have Maureen Smith. She is the academic director for Homeschool Baja and Sonora, which are two states in Mexico, in northern Mexico. She's got over 30 years of education experience schools in those states. She's been for 17 years involved in homeschooling with her own family and helping other families. Has a ministry that works with families in Latin America on homeschooling issues. She's bicultural, bilingual because she grew up in the United States and spent more time living in Mexico than any other place. So it's really great to have Maureen with us. She's a woman of God. She wants to protect children based on what the child rearing and education. And so Maureen, thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's so encouraging to be able to be here.
Well, thank you, Maureen. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with homeschool. I understand that, like in Mexico or like in the United States, it's a little bit about what you've noticed.
Yeah, so homeschool is having a big here in Mexico. It's like what used to be in 70s United States. So it's divided differently, like the northern part and the southern part of Mexico. The idea in the south is still a little bit more like in the 70s, where people, were still kind of scared to go out of their homes, for people to be able to see that the kids weren't going to a private or public school. And they're still trying to kind of figure out a little bit more, how to um, be able to educate their kids and how to be able to take this step of faith. And here in the northern part, because we are a lot closer to the border, I think we just have a different concept of homeschooling. And I could say that we probably follow a little bit more, to the guidelines of what is happening right now in the United States. And so it's really exciting because you see all kinds of different homeschooling being taken place. You have the classical, you have those parents that are really set for the academics, and then you have those that are the unschool, that are out there and they do their own and they travel a lot. So it's a big variety, but it's really fun to be able to see this new era of homeschool families here in Mexico. It's really cool.
Oh, well, that's really exciting. It's,
Yeah.
I'm a huge promoter of homeschooling, and it makes me smile to know that there's more of that going on in Mexico today. So tell us a little bit about the legal status. My understanding is that it's a little bit obscure. Tell us what you know about the legal situation with homeschooling in Mexico right now.
Okay, so that's a really good question, Alex. As you know, in the United States, there's three educational systems, right, that are legal. So we know that there is the private, the public, and also homeschool. In Mexico, we have fundamental constitutional rights under the third article of the Constitution of Mexico that states that every child deserves an education, but it doesn't really specify how that education should be. So that's where we fit in. Actually, it is a regulated system, but it's not an official system. Okay, a lot of people get that confused. They think that it's not legal to homeschool. It is legal to homeschool under our constitutional rights. It's just not regulated. Okay, so that's the first thing. When we do homeschooling here in Mexico, there are different ways to be able to homeschool. So to be able to have a certification, okay, for the documents that the kids are requiring. So one of them is you can get um, uh, you can get an umbrella school from the United States that can be able to do that coverage, that umbrella, okay, certification that is required. And a lot of people do that more in the northern part of the country. That's the difference. That's another difference also from the south and the north. Down south of Mexico, you will find that a lot more families will prefer to be able to have their kids go through the process of doing an open testing with the educational system here in Mexico through INEA. So it's a program that existed back in the 70s, back in the 80s for adults. Actually, it's a program that was done for adults to be able to get their primary, their elementary education, and then with years, then it was also brought into junior high for adults to be able to do their junior high. So, because we have so many families that now homeschool, and also families that maybe are at remote areas that can't be in a private or a public school frame, so this option is open for them to be able to do their testing. So they study up, and in 2 weeks they present their test, and then they can be able to get the certification for all elementary. If they do the junior high testing, then it's the same thing. The Secretaría de Educación Pública, which is the educational system here in Mexico, will be able to give them the guidelines as to what they need to study. And with that, then, they go and they present the test. And with that, then they can also get their certificate for their secundaria, which is their junior high. All right. So for us, in particular, for my opinion, I feel that I don't want to submit my kids into this type of testing. I believe that there's other venues to be able to get this certification for our kids here in Mexico. And but still, this is a good option for those that want to be able to find, this option of education. So another thing also is that here in Mexico, you find a lot of people that are now doing their own curricula. So they design their own curricula at home, or they follow through some curricula that is from editorials, some other editorials that are existent here in Mexico. So it's a little bit of a combination, but the SEP, which is the Secretaría de Educación Pública, requires for kids to be able to do at least 5 subjects, just like in the United States. So they have to do science, history, math, Spanish, and the art or sports. Okay, well, they were a little bit more than 5. But in this, we see that parents try to comply to this. And once they go to INEA, then, what they're doing at home doesn't really give them a support. It is just done on their own. And what gives validation or the certification is actually the testing. I don't know does that make sense?
It does,
Alex?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, it
All
sounds
right.
like the regulation is a little bit tighter than it is in most of the United States, but hopefully with the efforts of people like you, that eventually more homeschool freedom will be allowed. I want to talk also about some of the changes that are I've focused a lot on the changes that are happening in the United States and the LGBT stuff now that's in, and the kind of move toward more and more citizenship and all that. I understand that there's some of that coming in Mexico. A little bit about some of the changes that are coming for public and private schools in
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think I need to go back a little bit more. If we go back to 1917, our political constitution here in Mexico under the Article 31st stated that all Mexicans required to be able to make sure that children could be able to have an education. And it gave the responsibility to all Mexican citizens, okay? And we saw also that there was an age frame of 15 years of age for private or public schooling for kids. And then we also see that at that time, the educational system was pushed by a lot of the churches. The clergy, okay, was the one that pushed here in Mexico for the education. So it was pretty much homeschool at that time. And, that's how it started. So there was also the information at that time, the idea of education was that parents were the ones that had the decision making for the children's education, that they knew best the ideals of life, were those that they could be learned, by their parents. So the idea back then was that parents could instruct, but that the schools could educate. So there's a big difference right there, right? One thing is to educate, and the other one is to instruct. So if we fast forward a little bit more into time, we will be able to see also that a few changes took place with one of our presidents in 1993. That was Carlos Salinas de Gortari, where he changed this constitution, this educational system, to an obligation. Okay, the word for obligation was the first time that was implemented in 1993. And so here he was saying that this option was now obligatory for all students. And he bumped up the age from 15 up to 18 years of age. Okay. So this was consistent, and there were a few changes with different presidents until this year. Last year, 2019. Right now, the former president, AMLO López Obrador, in August 2019, they wrote a proposal where it was also voted in September 2019, called La Reforma Educativa Nacional. This is the educational constitutional reform for Mexico. And this is the first time that we saw a huge change in what they call now La Nueva Escuela de México, the new school of Mexico. And as well as, I've been, working with the United States now for 16 years, and I've been seeing what has been taking place in the educational system, in the US with the Common Core. And so I kind of, get a better idea of, what has come into our country here in Mexico, and understanding also, you're more gifted in this area than I am, but we both know that there's also a plan for a global education that is going to be taking place, and so that is backed by the UN. So when this comes in August and in September, we had to really be attentive to these changes. So some of the changes that took place, to be able to answer your question, was we started seeing that there was a dumbing down of the math. There was a dumbing down and a change also for the history. There was a change that I will talk about in a few minutes. Three things that were really basic that really jumped out at me, that we both know that these are the key points of the Common Core curricula. One is the humanistic side, the other one, the agenda for also the progressive way of thinking, and the other one that has to do also with the environment, everything that has to do with the environment. So those 3 points that are right there were the basics that stuck out. We started seeing also that sex ed was going to be implemented from kindergarten. And that is a big one. Just like in the United States, the curriculum that is coming in is so gosh awful. It is not appropriate for these kids, for the little ones, not even in elementary. I advocate for kids protection. And I think that this is not something that is for the schools to be teaching at such a young age. And I truly believe that it's the parents' right to be able to talk to the kids about, sex ed. But the thing is that what is coming into our curriculum isn't just sexual education, like what I saw when I was in 6th grade, right? That you just see it for 1 month, right? Or maybe 2 weeks, correct? And so where it has to do with the reproductive organs and so on. But now we're talking also about the homosexual agenda, and we're talking about all the different abilities of what and how and where and how you can do, right? And so this only promotes more for kids to be promiscuous, for the pedophile, agenda also in the education. I see that kids also are geared more for the help of the schools to be able to help them to be able to have access to more abortions, and also for them to be able to have access to having this liberty of sexual intercourse without the consent of the parents. Does that make sense? And
It
so
does.
this is really alarming, for us. Again, we keep on saying, how come, kids are allowed to be able to see this in their textbooks, to be able to see pornography and to be able to see visual videos at school, and without parents really knowing what is happening, okay, without their consent. So that is one of the things. Another thing also that has come into the educational system here in Mexico is the humanistic way of thinking. We see that like the United States was founded in Christian principles. Mexico, in the larger form, has been founded in Catholic, but biblical principles. All right. So, and in my opinion, what I see is that there's a new type of religion that is also wanting to be implemented through the education. So, what they want is to be able to come back to the indigenous way of thinking, the indigenous traditions, but also the indigenous religion. All right. And we experienced something we have some friends that live in San Luis Rio Colorado, in Sonora, in the state of Sonora, and they are pastors, and they were explaining to us of some of the things that were occurring in some of these public schools this last year. And in one of the Spanish curriculums, there are rituals or prayers, ancient prayers, that have been implemented into the curricula. So what the
Wow.
kids need to do is not only learn about the culture, but what they're also doing is that they have to also speak out, okay, these prayers. And so as they're doing it, it's a way of chanting, right? It's a way of, I don't know if that's the correct liturgy, but they also started having all kinds of things that were happening at that school, and it's opening the spiritual realm, right, to the spiritual gods. And I think that this is very alarming as to that what wants to be done. I think that it's important to always to go back to your culture, important to be able to go back to your foundation, right, of what is in your country. But I do choice of freedom, to the way how we want to educate our kids. This does not need to be imposed way for everybody, okay, to be able to, especially if you are a Christian. I know that a lot of or Jews oppose, okay, to this also here. Another thing also that is really, really, out of control, I would say right now, is also the agenda that has been placed and that is coming in freely into also the curricula. And there's a huge push here in Mexico right now for kids' liberty, okay, for kids' rights. That's the correct terminology. For kids' rights. It's backed by the UN. But one of the things that I was telling you about, Alex, also when I reached out to you was I'm worried about how they turned our constitutional right in the third article that I was explaining, where it says that every child deserves an education, okay? And it doesn't specify how that education should be. It just says that every child deserves an education. So what they did, and this is the terminology that was explained also in this new educational reform, was that they said, because the children deserve an education under the third article of the Constitution of Mexico, whoever opposes to this, and listen to this word, whoever opposes to this right, okay, of the new education that is being implemented will have consequence. They will have a consequence. So what they are saying is that if a teacher, a parent opposes to this new form of education here in Mexico, then there will be sanctions. There can be sanctions because we are starting to see that the kids' rights are above parents' rights,
Yep.
above, the teachers' rights. And so this is a little bit alarming for me. And as I was also reading through this reform, there was also a section where it stated, and it was direct to the churches. And it says, even if there are any churches or any religious groups that oppose to this, there can be a sanction. So this
Wow.
was a little bit alarming. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the last few
Yeah.
minutes we have left, Maureen, also, I
Yes.
know they're trying to come after the private schools now too, and suck them all into teaching. Yeah, and I saw we were living in Sweden most recently, and the government almost the same language. They said that all children have a right to education, and therefore they all need to be learning the same stuff. And then they said to the private schools, you all have to teach the government curriculum. So what's the story in Mexico now? I understand there's some efforts to take charge of what the private schools are teaching as well.
Yeah. So, okay, May 15th, down in Puebla, down south of Mexico, okay, there was a new reform or a law that took place under the Article 105, okay? It's called La Ley General de Educación de Puebla. And this was voted in. And there was an uproar. I mean, people were not happy with this new law, this educational law that took place. Actually, it took place while everybody was indoors with a COVID and legislatures passed. Okay, and not too many people knew that this was taking place until it was out there. And so, about a month ago, in right now, the same thing started occurring in another one of the states that is Baja Norte, and so thank God there were some very wise women in education in the private system, great godly women that God gave them insight of what was happening. And so they were able to stop this with legislatures, also with, with abogados. Sorry, you
Lawyers.
guys, with lawyers, okay, also with lawyers. And so they were able to, at that moment, to be able to stop this. So let me explain really fast just what is happening here in Baja. We are waiting. There's proposals that are being by universities, by private schools, to be able to take to Congress. And hopefully, this will until September. But these are a few of the things that are taking place. So is that all assets and of the schools will now belong to the state. Therefore, all the efforts of years to acquire property, real estate, curricula will cease to be private and will become government property.
Oh my.
And that means that even if we have a pen right now, that will be the property for the government. Okay,
Oh,
so this is really alarming. We see here that this is definitely not good. We also are seeing a big push for the curricula, any kind of extracurricula, the curricula that is designed, or like let's just say a good curricula like Oxford or Cambridge curricula, even Christian curricula, a Beck of books, Bob Jones, any kind of curricula. If these are private schools that are Christian, they will not be able to use this curricula anymore. What they want is for the free public system curriculum from the Secretaría de Educación Pública to be the only one that will be used. So we can see here that there is an agenda for the global, right, for the global curriculum to be implemented. All right. So the next one also that is really alarming is this will not give us any vote or option to the parents as to where we want our kids to be educated, what curriculum, we want our kids to be able to be, to be able to have. And we have to admit that this curriculum is so dumbed down. The level is so low. And most of the private schools, what they try to do is to complement. They will complement to this curricula that is from the state so that they can have a higher academic level. And so that in a way, it's also to protect the kids, right, from many of the things that are in this curricula. The next one also is there's going to be sanctions of, okay, are you ready?
Yep.
$225,000, all right, if there's not a compliance to what the state is requiring of the schools. So this is extreme. In a way, it's like they're trying to push the schools to be able to close. And this is not favorable. This is not good. I mean, there has been sanctions that have taken place in the past, and many private schools will probably say, you know what, okay, you know what, do it, but I need to really protect, my students, okay, in this. So one of the most alarming things also is that now the law will also empower students for reporting schools and state. That means teachers, principals, anybody, okay, who will not, okay, comply to the curricula or to the state legislatures that are being imposed. So these are a few of the things that are taking place right now. And we hope to be able to stop this in the state of Baja California, not grow, and it also doesn't take place in other states in Mexico. So
Wow.
that's what's taking
Thank you.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. For the Americans out there who think this isn't going to affect us, it's coming all over the world. America might be the last one
Yeah.
standing, but it's coming here. You've got the government in New York State already threatening to shut down the Jewish schools, the yeshivas, because they're not teaching what the government wants taught.
Yeah.
So they fully intend to make sure that every child on this planet is educated using the same dumbed down, really bizarre standards. And for those of you who watch this channel regularly, we've gone through some of this. Go back and watch our video on educating for the New World Order. The UN, through UNESCO, has the World Core Curriculum, which is literally based on the teachings of an occultist, Alice Bailey, founder of
Yeah.
the Lucifer Publishing
Yeah.
Company. So, I mean, it's all right
Yeah.
there for you to see that it's a very open agenda. It's coming to our neighbors to the south. It's coming to our neighbors to the north. It's in America now. Guys, we have got to get involved for the sake of our children, for the sake of our liberty. Maureen, tell us, I know you guys have a Facebook page where people can learn more, and tell us about some of your future efforts in the last little bit of time that we have here.
Okay, yeah, sure. You guys can look for us. Also, we have a homepage there on Facebook where you guys can contact us. It is called Homeschool Baja Sonora, Mexico. And we'd love to be able to hear from you. If you have any other questions, yeah, I'll be glad to be able to answer some of those questions, But in the future, basically what we're trying to do is to be able to stop, what is happening in each state. And I think that we are advocates for the rights of education for our children. We want to be able to have homeschool, to be able to be open, for more people to be able to educate at home, to be able to have the liberty to be able to have dumbed down kids. I think that kids have the right to be smart, intelligent, to be logical in their thinking, and to be God-fearing, and so to be responsible citizens. So that is in my heart, as we mentor families here in Mexico, as we work with families, that is in our heart, that we can be able to rise up a new generation of kids, that are smart.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for sharing that. And what you
Yeah.
said there, it strikes me as so important. God says in Proverbs twice, Proverbs 1:7, Proverbs
Yeah.
9:10, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of knowledge. And these, secular, humanistic, and really occult curricula that are coming in all over the world.
Yeah.
What you mentioned with the ancient Mexican gods, and this is coming all over the world. This fundamentally removes the fear of the Lord. You can't even talk about the Lord anymore. And that's not a real education. If you believe the Bible, that's a counterfeit. So, folks, this is so important. Get involved. Go check out the Facebook page. Get involved in your local community. I mean, this isn't just happening in Mexico. This is happening all over the world. If it's not in your state yet, it will be very, very soon. So make sure you're protecting your children. Make sure sure you're staying active in this fight. Maureen, thanks once again for coming on. Please keep us
Yeah.
posted on what's happening in Mexico. We'll check back in with you soon. And to everybody out there, thank you for watching. God bless you all. Take good care, protect your children, and until next time, God bless.